Welcome, folks. Looks like we've got a few people who have joined in. We're sorry we were a couple minutes late to get things rolling, but we're here now. So I am going to get us started. Hello and welcome to A Parent's Guide to Books on Tricky Topics, presented by Jackson County Library Services. My name is Ellie Anderson, and I am Head of Adult Services at the Ashland branch of Jackson County Libraries. And my co-host today is Monica Owens. She's in charge of children's services at our Medford branch. So today's program is set up as a webinar. So you'll be hearing from me and Monica today, and then there will be an opportunity at the end for us to do some Q&A. The way we're going to do that is via the chat option for the program. So as we go through, if a question comes up or at the end when we're asking for it, you can go ahead and put any questions and things like that in our chat, and we'll read out them and read out your questions and address those then. Let's see. I want to, it says the views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Jackson County Library Services. Today's program is part of our Rogue Reads celebration. It's a program designed to encourage everyone in the Rogue Valley to read and discuss the same books with the goal of promoting reading and building community through conversation. Rogue Reads is sponsored in part by Jackson County Library Foundation, by Coastal Media, Jefferson Public Radio, and Rosebud Media. All right. So today, as I said, Monica and I are going to be leading the program. We've got most of it is via PowerPoint because we wanted you to be able to see some of the books, the examples of some of the books that we're talking about today. But the first part that we were going to do is introduce ourselves. So let me get going with that PowerPoint slide. I'll be right back. A Parent's Guide to Books on Tricky Topics, using books as conversation starters with your children. And I guess I do want to take a minute to say that our title says Parent's Guide, but really this is useful for anybody who spends time with children. Anybody who's got important kids in their lives, whether you're a parent or an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent or a good friend or a teacher. Books can be really useful tools. So let's see. Yes, your hosts today, Ellie and Monica. I'll introduce myself and I'll let Monica have a few words after that. My name is Ellie. I work in adult services currently at the Ashland branch of Jackson County Libraries. I've been a librarian for, 12 years, something like that, 12, 13 years. And I've worked in teen services and children's services and adult services, doing lots of programming and story times and outreach and all kinds of things all over the place. So that's my background. I'm also a parent. I have a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old. So I've been reading books with those kids for quite a while now. I'm a reader myself, and I know I've grown a lot through the books that I have read over the years, and I'm a community member, as are we all, and I take pretty seriously the notion that we are raising our children together as a community, and we have a responsibility to the future of our community. So that's me in a nutshell. Monica, do you want to speak for a minute?
Let me start though. I don't see the PowerPoint.
Oh, I should have. Oh, you know why? That's because I forgot to share screen. Let's try that. I'm glad you said so. There we go. That's how this works. All right, Monica's turn.
So I'm Monica Owens, and I am the children's librarian, as Ellie said, in the Medford Library. And I too am a parent. However, I have adult children, but once upon a time they were young. So, I've experienced a lot of, these kind of topics in the past. I can beat Ellie on how long I've been a librarian. I've probably been about 20 maybe a little bit more than 20 years, but that's all I'm willing to admit. And luckily, I have done a variety of types of library services, children's, adult, teens. I even worked in a prison jail library for a while. So I've had a good variety of working with different types of people in libraries. I too read, and one of the things that I really like about reading is just how I can learn about different topics that maybe I'm not exposed to in my regular life. And I think what we'll be talking about today can help with those type of things too. Some of the things we're going to be talking about may not be something that directly happens to your children. In fact, most of them, a lot of them won't be necessarily, something, or certainly not all of them, but they're going to know maybe classmates or whatever that have that. So this can help them kind of, understand. And I am a new community member. I've been here since about August. So I'm enjoying being part of the community and look forward to meeting more of you at the library.
All right, so I'm going to jump on in. So why talk about tricky topics with kids? And I think this is worth asking, because I think some folks are like, well, they're just children. Let's not bother them with this kind of thing. I mean, let's let them keep their innocence and just live happy child lives. And I think there's value in wanting to protect your children from the hard stuff in life. Everybody who's made it into adulthood knows that life is hard sometimes, and nobody wants their child to hurt or experience something that's going to make them sad. But I think whether we like it or not, children will encounter challenging experiences and challenging concepts as they go through life. And if they have someone they can talk to, someone they trust that they can bring questions to, then they can be better prepared to navigate those challenges. Having those conversations before a kid encounters something hard can help them prepare them for that sort of thing, so they're not shocked by it as much as they might be, or harmed by it. And then having a conversation after something has happened helps them understand what to do next. What an honor too, to have a relationship with a child where they feel comfortable coming to you and saying, I saw something that I didn't understand, or something happened to me and it didn't feel good, or whatever. To be that adult in a child's life is such a gift. And as an adult, it can be really hard to know what to say about when a child brings you something heavy like that. And so it also helps prepare to having these conversations, and reading books with kids about these kinds of things helps prepare us to know how to talk to it in a way that makes sense to a kiddo. And why are books useful tools for this? So books are written for kids. Children's books are written for kids, and they use those age-appropriate language. They boil things down to concepts that kids can wrap their heads around. A lot of these are big. I mean, let's talk about, if a kid comes and they see somebody who unhoused on the street, and they say, why doesn't that person have somewhere to live? I mean, that's a big question. So how do you answer that? A book can help you figure out how to talk about that in a way that's your child is going to be able to grapple with and won't overwhelm them. They make those big concepts the more concrete, more specific. If you can read a story of someone who has experienced that something in their life, then you can be more specific about what that experience might be. And that helps. Kids are concrete thinkers. They need to be able to pin something to something real. Abstract thought comes later. So having something an example is really helpful. The actual physical book gives both the adult and the child something that they can focus on and refer to while they're having this conversation. It takes the pressure off a little bit, instead of being like, right, I'm your mom and I'm going to give you the answers. Oh my gosh, I don't have the answers. But maybe if we share this book, we can look for some of the answers together. It makes it more of a collaborative, trust-building exercise. And the last thing I put in here is that learning other people's stories builds empathy. Seeing your own story gives your experience validation. This is this concept that we like to talk about, and educators and librarians like to talk about how books can be mirrors where you can see yourself, see your own experience, learn something about yourself or feel that your story is worth being told. And they also can be windows into lives and experiences that are different from your experience, which is one reason why books are such a great empathy builder. I chose this particular book as an example for the image here. It's called All the Way to the Top, How One Girl's Fight for Americans with Disabilities Changed Everything. And I chose this particular book for a reason. It won an award just a year ago, I think, as an example of a story about people with disabilities. And it's a true story about a kid who has used a wheelchair, and she got really active in the disability rights movement in building up to the Americans with Disabilities Act being passed in the 90s. And she, through her activism and her using her the things that she did to put a face and a voice to people with disabilities, helped get that act passed. I read this book with my son last year. He was 8 at the time. We sat down and because it won an award, so I brought it home, and we sat down and we read it together, and we learned about her experience. And at the end of it, my 8-year-old kind of sat there and thought for a minute, and he thought, he said, "I'm really glad I don't have a disability." And I said something like, "Oh, yeah, it seems like it would be hard to go through life in a wheelchair," or something kind of innocuous and like that. And then he sat and he thought a little bit longer. And he said, "Well, I wear glasses. I can't read very well without my glasses. My glasses are kind of like her wheelchair." And I was just flabbergasted. I thought, wow, what an amazing thing that this kid made that leap. But what an amazing thing that the book was a good enough book and told the story well enough to help him put himself in her shoes and find a common ground with somebody who at the first glance might have seemed like her experience was really different from his. So that's an example of a way that a book can lead to that kind of insight. All right, so gotta keep moving. We want to get through here. Oh, so what's a tricky topic? This is good to talk about. I think it's going to be different for everybody. Everybody's going to have things that they're more comfortable talking about than others, like whatever, probably down to what your life experience is like. Something that you've got a lot of experience with probably will come more easily to you. Unless, though I don't know, there's not a guarantee for that. The topics that we find tricky are going to be different for everybody. It might be something that is objectively upsetting: poverty, natural disasters, violence. That's all like that. That's definitely hard to talk about with kids, no matter who you are. But also the topic might not necessarily be a guaranteed like negative thing. It might just be complicated and difficult to put into terms that make sense for a kid or with which you're comfortable talking to a kid. Right. So I've kind of blazed through those. Monica, did you have anything you wanted to add to those subjects?
No. I think that covers it. I guess I would just say too that we'll be going over some today and talking about some other resources that we have, but there could be other things that you find to be a tricky topic and stuff. So tricky topic can be whatever it is that's difficult for maybe you to discuss or that you don't have a background in. And so that's another thing about having the books, is that you yourself can be have some tools to use about something that you don't know about and how to talk to your child.
Yeah, not every book. Sometimes you share the books with the kids. Sometimes it makes sense to just read the book yourself and then have the starting things. And I guess, another thing that I don't think we said explicitly in our program yet is that at the library, we try to have a wide variety of viewpoints and a wide variety of subject matter. And if you encounter something that you'd like some materials to help you talk to your kiddo about, we invite you to please come in and talk to the library staff and say, "Hey, I need some books on adoption," let's say, which is one of those like might be complicated to talk about kinds of things. And we'll do our best to help you find materials that will work for you and your family. I
guess I would just say one more thing, going back to the why to use books to like adults do have more experience and more brain development and that sort of thing. Whereas children picture books, especially, they're great for discussing serious topics because they can take abstract ideas and, you know, kind of boil them down into more simple language. And that the pictures also too can enhance the narrative to give the child a better understanding. And you can not just read the books, but also talk about the pages and the pictures and what does this, you know, make you feel when you see this picture and that sort of thing. So, all righty, it is time for some examples. So I'm gonna just jump right in with some fun stuff. Death and grieving. We all like to talk about that, right? It's one of our favorite topics. And as adults, you know, we're like super comfortable with it. Like we know what to say, right? No matter what, people have a hard time talking about death and grieving. So, you know, that's another benefit is that the books can kind of help talk for us and, you know, help us kind of know what to say. And so that, the other thing too is that out of all the topics, I can promise you that this is something that your children are going to be faced with it. It's one of the topics that happens to everyone. Like there's no getting around it. And, you know, even as children, if it's not somebody specifically that, you know, like a family member or somebody that they know closely, it's going to be maybe a child in their classroom or, you know, a friend, somebody that they know about, or they're going to hear about it. Maybe they're reading a different book and it comes up as a topic. Like they're going to be exposed to it and they're going to have questions. I mean, it's a scary thing. So, yeah, that's why it's important to, you know, just kind of be aware of what some of these tools are. The first one is a book. I would say it's for every age. I mean, I learned from it just some things about things that people say to children that probably are not the right thing based on how the children process what you're saying. So the book is called Death is Stupid. And come on, if you're a kid, no matter what you say, death is just stupid. And stupid is one of those words that children are taught not to say. It's like a bad word. And I watched a video, and I encourage you, if you're interested in this, like pull up a video, like you can Google about Death is Stupid and the author's name. And there is actually a video of the author reading it, and she gives some commentary as she's doing it. And, you know, she says, like, I just started on the title and I said a bad word, you know, stupid. So, so anyway, that's just like a good way to like start and catch the child's attention. It has some really interesting artwork. She does it all kind of like in a collage format. And again, it has a lot of like what people say that they think that they're helping and that the children perceive very differently. So I'm just going to read a couple of pages to kind of give you an idea. So the little boy's at the funeral, and somebody, what do they say? Somebody probably says they're, you know, she's in a better place or something. And he says, death is not better, it's stupid. And so the adults are saying, we just mean she's at peace. She can rest, and don't say stupid. And the boy says, why can't she rest here with me and still be alive? So then on the next page, it shows in his imagination, and he's bringing in a tray with a bowl and some flowers. Here's your breakfast, Grandma. I'm going out to take care of your garden. If you need me for anything, just yell out the window. I'll come running. And the grandma says, and she's in bed, she's holding her pearls. Oh, thank you for letting me rest, dear. Now I don't have to die. So I think that's like, there's just like a combination of things. And again, they're things that people say. So I've said, you know, some of the things in there. And regardless, you're not going to protect your children from hearing this, but you can talk to them when they have heard these things and, you know, go into ask them more and, talk it through with them in a way that they're going to be able to understand and feel better about it. There's the next one is called The Memory Box, a book about grief. And what I like about this one does talk about, well, it starts out about a little girl and she's lost her balloon. And she says, I tried so hard to hold on tight to never let it go. But it was windy and I was running. I watched it fly, but it still went away and she was sad. But then, that's something that she can, let go. But she's not as sad as I am now. I can always get another balloon. But I can never have another you. I miss you. So it goes on and talks about some of her emotions and that sort of thing. But what I really like about this is it gives something tangible in the book for to help the child with grieving, and that is to make a memory box where they will have a box and they will collect things that will help remind them of their loved one. So it's like an active thing. It's not just, they're not just, all in their head about it. They're able to do something and hold on. And it also helps kind of drive the point home to children that, you can still remember them. Like, you're not going to forget them, that having all these memories of them is still, something that nobody can take away from you, not even death. So, and again, I would say this is probably for about, who it was written for, probably, first, second grade in that area, younger elementary schools. But again, I think it's something that would be great for every age, because, even older kids can benefit from doing some of those tactile things. I'll be a little personal here and let you know one of the reasons that this topic is really important to me is that when my kids were young, their father and my husband died. And so they went to some art therapy, and this is kind of the thing that they did at the art therapy to help with that, is do some tangible hands-on things. And again, going back to, while it may not happen to your children when they're young, as far as knowing somebody, there were all the kids from her classes and all the, or from both my kids' classes and their swim team and their church youth group and that sort of thing, that were all being exposed to this topic. And I'm sure they were asking, like, is that going to happen to you? And, what happened? Why did it happen? And all that kind of thing. So, that was another thing I wanted to point out about that. The final one is definitely good for like preschool, the younger kids, and it's called The Goodbye Book. And it's by Todd Parr. He writes a lot of books and they all have like a similar look, really bright illustrations. There's not very many words on the page and so many different topics. He does have some serious ones, but he also has ones like the Spring Book or whatever. And you just can't go wrong with the Todd Parr book. But anyway, The Goodbye Book, you can see there's the green fish, and you may not be able to tell from the picture, I don't know, but the red fish has a tear in its eye. And this one, again, kind of talks about feelings. Things might not seem fun anymore. You might not feel like eating. You might not feel like sleeping. It doesn't really ever get super into like that it's death. It can be other kinds of goodbyes. It's sad for children when their parents have to go away for a while. Maybe a parent that has to go serving in the military and has to be away for that. Like, that's hard for kids. And so this gives them both recognition of those feelings and also, just tools and positive things to know about that. So.
Sorry guys, I'm going.
That's okay. I was done. She's cutting me off. It's like the Oscars where they like start playing the music or something. So, all right, that's what I had as far as that.
All right, so those are 3 good examples for the topic of death and grieving. Now, I just gave you a preview But the one I was going to talk about consent with kids. And I think this is important. Well, hold on. Did I do that? Let's try again. There we are. All right, everybody seeing this slide, the consent slide right now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now I think that a lot of times we think about having conversations about consent and bodies and what's okay to do with other people's bodies as a good conversation to have with a teenager, or to have somebody who's getting older and maybe getting into relationships and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of thought that it makes sense to start having these conversations early, much earlier in life, having conversations about just respecting each other's bodies. We don't pull somebody into doing something that they don't want to do. We ask before we force something on somebody. It helps kids understand how to set their own boundaries about what they're comfortable with. It tells them it's okay to say no if there's something that they don't like. And that can be anything. That can be, do you want a hug? No hugs right now. Okay, that's all right. Do you want a high five instead? Okay, a high five works right now. It can, and the heaviest reason to get your young children set up with that kind of confidence is in case there is somebody in some probably adult or other like person who tries to take advantage of them. Nobody likes to think about child abuse, but if you instill a strong sense in your kid that like, it's okay to say no if an adult tries to do something with you that you don't feel right about. And if somebody does, then you do have adults that you can trust, that you can talk to. If you give them that message early, and if you build their sort of faith in their own like inner compass of like what feels good and what does not feel good, and that's okay, then that gives them tools when hopefully they will never find themselves in a situation where someone's trying to take advantage of them, but just in case. But I mean, that's the most serious end of it. There's also just like, kids shouldn't have to do something that they're not comfortable with. They shouldn't have to do something that makes them feel bad. That's not what a hug is for, you know? And the flip side of that is that adults that's a good modeling from adults to listen when a child says no thank you to any kind of touch, even if it's kindly meant. So I've got a few examples for different age groups here. The first one you see is Rissy No Kissies, and that one is definitely for little kids. It is a book that you could read with your preschooler. Rissy is a lovebird, and everybody knows lovebirds love kisses, but Rissy doesn't like kisses. And there's, I think Rissy's grandmother in this particular book gets upset because grandmother just wants to give a nice kiss, but Rissy doesn't want a kiss. And eventually Rissy's parents understand that, it's not that Rissy doesn't want love and Rissy doesn't want affection. Rissy just doesn't want kisses. Rissy likes to play, Rissy likes to snuggle, Rissy likes high fives. Rissy just doesn't want kisses. And the parents help the child communicate that to other adults in their life, which I think is a nice model as well. And gives a good sort of starting point if there's a kid in your life who might not always be comfortable with those kinds of expressions of affection. The second one here is called My Body, What I Say Goes. And you could certainly read that with a kindergartner. You could read it with a lot of different ages of elementary school kid. The title is very clear, like it pretty much encapsulates what the book is about. It talks about body autonomy and in a kid-friendly way of like, my body is my body and I am in charge of my body, and what that could look like in several different ways. And empowering kids to be there, to set their own boundaries. The third one that's called Consent for Kids, Boundaries, Respect, and Being in Charge of You is really fun. It's maybe a like middle of elementary school and up kind of book. I think I handed it to my now 9-year-old, and he thought it was kind of fun because it's written, it's a graphic novel basically. It's these fun little sort of stick figure characters, and it has specific examples of situations where where respecting other people is important, and it gives it has a wide variety of examples and just sort of real life situations that could be there. So that's my consent slide. I'm handing it back to Monica for mental health.
Okay. So this is an especially important topic now because all of us have gone through so much in the past couple of years, and there are all sorts of studies and talks about all ages, but also children, and how much this pandemic and the disruptions in their lives and the school and everything, how much that's really affected children. And unfortunately, all the adults are going through it too. So sometimes it could be hard for us to talk about that. So I've got a couple of books that kind of talk about depression in children, the children themselves facing that. But, as you know, there's a wide range of different types of mental illnesses, and it can be the children experience it through something a parent does, or grandparent, or friends have to go to a counselor or something like that. So anyway, we do have more resources about that, but I'm just going to talk about these ones for right now. So the first one is The Princess and the Fog by Lloyd Jones. Obviously the title is kind of a takeoff on The Princess and the Frog, but doesn't really follow that story at all. It starts with a princess who is happy. She kind of have everything she wants, and the subjects love her, and everything is good until the fog comes. And the fog comes slowly at first, and it affects the princess, but nobody else really notices. And it keeps kind of getting worse, and more fog and bigger fog. And she's not interested in doing any of those things that she used to enjoy. And she's just really having a hard time. She just sits on her throne, and just, people can't get her to come out and play or do anything. So they start to notice. So it talks about, how they can help her get out of that fog. And one of the things that it talks about is they give her like kind of a challenge to overcome, just something small and stuff, but then that helps her self-esteem, and she starts to feel better. And I know that that's something, if you've gone to counseling or whatever, or, read books about, like self-help and improvement, that's often a tactic they use, is like, don't try and fix everything, just find one small thing, like a challenge that you can overcome. And then, you can kind of build on that. So it does end with her being happier, but also the recognition that she's going to go through times when that fog is going to come back for a while, but she's learned a little bit more about how to deal with it. So all that in a real simple picture book with not a ton of words. So really like that one. The next one, and that one's for younger kids, as you probably guessed, being a picture book and that sort of thing. The next one is a graphic novel. So again, kind of the comic book style. And, that's definitely something that appeals to a lot of kids, reading those graphic novels. So it makes it kind of an easier one to have them read without like, hey, read this book about mental illness, they just love reading it. The author of it, I can never really say her name very well, but Raina Telgemeier, I believe it is, has written other graphic novels. Kids eat them up. We can't keep them on the shelf. So anyway, she's, it's not only a graphic novel, it's like a popular author. So kind of like the middle school, older elementary, middle school type age. And the main character in it, again, it's not all about the mental illness and stuff, but the main character gets to a point where she's really having a hard time, and her parents take her to a counselor. So that's what I really like about this, is the character does go to a counselor. So, you know, if your child's going through this or one of their friends is going to a counselor, it kind of just like explains a little bit about like what that process is like without explaining it. It just shows it, you know. First, she doesn't really want to talk very much. She doesn't really see how this is going to help. And then, you know, it kind of builds from there as far as she gets more comfortable and the counselor does help her and stuff. So that's why I really like that one. And then my final one is a mental illness that's, you know, a little bit, well, a lot more rare than like depression for, you know, children and, you know, older children, you know, for everybody. And this book is about schizophrenia. And this book is about a 12-year-old girl named Della. And Della lives in a small town on a farm with her baby sister, who is kind of a handful, and her mom and her dad. And she finds her mom at the beginning of the book on the floor picking seeds out of a watermelon. And the mom says something about like how she's protecting the girls, and she's just like obsessed with this and not really making any sense. And the girl's like, oh gosh, it's going to happen again. Because when Della was 8, her mom had to go stay at a mental hospital, and Della does not want that to happen again. So she decides, since she's 12 and she was only 8 before, that she can change it this time. She can make it better. So she's going to help with a baby sister. She's going to help on the farm. She's going to do all these things. And then her mom's going to not get worse. So obviously that doesn't work. And, you know, Della has to deal with some other things because she has learned that the mom's schizophrenia was brought on when she was born because of the hormonal changes and stuff that can happen for pregnancy. So not only is she living with all of that, she's worried about like, this is my fault, you know. So that's another reason she's really trying to do everything. She's trying to hide things from the neighbors. She's in a small town, and, you know, they're always asking, you know, based on what that happened to the mother before, like, how's your mama doing? And, you know, all that kind of stuff. And she doesn't want them to know that she's starting to get worse. So she's dealing with a lot. So it goes on and shows how the community members, her friends and stuff, really do support her. And the dad really does a good job throughout. I mean, it's hard for him too. But what I like about it is it just kind of ends in a note that we have to love people how they are. Like, she's never going to be a normal mom, you know, she's always going to struggle with this, but that we still love her and she's still a great mom. And like I said, with the watermelons and stuff, like that's kind of her theme, is she's just always worried about germs. She's always worried about her girls. And so Della can see that, like, even though her mom is not making sense, she's not normal, her mom loves her so much. And one thing I like is there's a book reference throughout it. Somebody gives her an Emily Dickinson book, which she doesn't totally understand all of them, but it just makes her feel better. And so one of her supportive people says to her at the end, sometimes when things get bad for me, books get to be some of my best friends. So that was what Miss Lorena said. So I really liked that, of course, for obvious reasons, but it's a really great book to read, whether you want to read about schizophrenia or not. Like, I just really love this book a lot. In case you didn't know, I love this book. So.
The next example we've got is book talking about race. And this one's hard, sort of, for me, because I can only come at it from my perspective. And there's a lot of perspectives on race and a lot of backgrounds that people come from where they might have different experiences from me. But I do know that we live in a world where there's people, a lot of different races and a lot of different backgrounds, and I am raising kids in it. And I want my children to be able to look at people who on the surface seem different from them I want them to be able to appreciate those differences and see past them both. So that's why, even if it might not seem like immediately incredibly important, like from my own children's daily lives, this might not be a book that they might pick up themselves. It is important to me to have conversations with them about race, because it's not something that we might be because it might not be something that we would automatically talk about. It's something that I want to bring up because I want them to be ready to live in a beautifully diverse world. So here are some examples of books that I hope will help them with that. The first one, All Are Welcome, is actually a book that my son told me about, that they read in school, I think, and it's about a school. It's called All Are Welcome by Alexander Penfold. It's set at a school, and it's a simple book. Great picture, preschoolers could read it. It's definitely like a great book for a kindergarten age kid, or I think my child, second grade teacher, read it to them. So it's got some age range to it, because the message is very clearly repeated again and again: all are welcome here at the school that is in the story. And you can see, if you see the picture there, there's a nice, visually a nice variety of people there. And most of that story is told through the pictures of who is included in the classroom, and they go to lunch, and look at all these wonderful different kinds of foods that people are eating, and they go out to play, and different people play in different ways and spend recess doing different things, and the friends who no matter when, and just the lots of children who look like they probably come from different backgrounds are connecting with each other, and the message repeated again and again throughout the book, all are welcome here, is a really nice sort of foundational concept, and for that you can that I think is important for young children to know, that a school is an inclusive place. And I hope they know that about libraries too. I want them to know that about their public library too. The next one here is called Let's Talk About Race by Julius Lester. And it is also it's a book that's probably like a kindergarten to third grade kind of age range. Although I think it could be used by older readers too. And I guess I do want to make that point about picture books are great because they are easy to share, and they do sort of boil things down to their essence, because they don't have the luxury of a lot of words. And while picture books may be the intended audience when a picture book is written would be for a young child, I think older kids can get a lot out of reading a good picture book, and so can adults. Speaking as an adult who enjoys picture books, not just with my kids, but for their own sake. But Let's Talk About Race is the concept of this book. Its main point is that we all have a story. We all have our own unique individual story, and we are many things. And one of the things is our race, and that's part of our bigger story. And we look around at each other, and again, it may seem that we're different, but underneath, like we are the same. We are humans. There's a lot of opportunity for connection. And of course, there's the concepts that come along with race and background and prejudice, and like the history that is connected with race. It gets things more complicated than that. When for an older child, or as if you get into a deeper conversation with your kid about that sort of thing. But the point of Let's Talk About Race is to celebrate all the different threads that make up the tapestry and of all of us. And it encourages the reader to look past the surface of a person and find out more about them than what you see at first glance, and find the common ground. The third book I've got up here, called Racism and Intolerance, is part of a series, Children of the World, or In Our World, I think. And the library owns several different titles in this series. This one is Racism and Intolerance. There's one about poverty as well, and other challenging topics. And they're also written for an elementary school audience. They are a nonfiction picture book that puts these complicated topics like racism into language that a child can understand. And that is and as such, it's a good tool for an adult to use that language and those concepts as they're introduced in the book. Probably a good idea. I would say if you were going to pick up one of these books and read with your kid, I would sit down and read it on my own first, so that I would, and then think about what questions might my child ask, and try to prepare yourself a little bit to be able to discuss these big topics with them, using the book as a tool. Oh, and a lot of these books also, like the books that are written specifically for to address issues like actually Rissy No Kissies from a couple slides ago was like this too. There's back matter. There's notes specifically for the adult at the very end of the book, to give you some pointers on how to address topics like that with your child, or also further reading that's intended for adults to help them talk about tough stuff. Okay. Techniques for sharing books. So that's one of them. Hey, I thought of one. Or like, yeah, read it yourself first and know and think about how you want to approach it. Make sure that it's a book that you feel like is going to work for you and your family, and how you want to talk about a topic. The other ones are, and then after you've read that, reading the book together. Sit down together, even if your child's an independent reader. You can sit down and you share the book. And like Monica said earlier, there's more to each book than the text, of course, especially as picture books. There's a lot of content in depth in a well-illustrated book as well. There are things you could talk about that might not be mentioned in the text, but might you could use as a springboard for a future conversation. Ask questions, don't just give answers. This is a good one, because that's how you can help your child begin to think critically. So what do you think about this? Is this something that have you ever seen anybody in a situation like this before? Is this something that that kids talk about at school? And then ask questions and then pause. Silence can be awkward in a conversation sometimes, but sometimes we're silent because we're thinking. And kids are capable of a lot of complicated thought and drawing their own conclusions if they're given the space and the support to do so. Oh yeah, drawing connections to your child's own experience. Like I think of that one in terms of the homelessness question, because that's something that we see in our communities, and children have such a strong sense of right and wrong, and it's wrong that anybody should not have somewhere to live. Everybody should have a place to live, I think is a fairly common thing that a lot of kids might think. And so you can, and if you've ever had that conversation with your child, or that that person that we see sometimes, that's that person that doesn't have a place to live. And if you're reading a book that addresses poverty or homelessness, then you can make it more real by connecting it to their own lives. Choose books from many perspectives is always good. It's a broad and diverse world, and different takes on hearing from different perspectives will allow your child to draw their own conclusions about what's important to them and how they understand the world from a multifaceted way. And read them all year long. This is okay. So it's February right now, right? And it's Black History Month, and we just had Chinese New Year. And there is always the fear that we'll only be reading books with Black people in them in February, or we're only going to be reading books with Asian protagonists during Chinese New Year. And it's important to remember that Asian people are Asian all year long, and that kind of thing. That those stories are important all the time, and the books and the concepts are important all the time. So then there are a lot of them that are just really wonderful books that can be incorporated into your reading habits with your family all the time. Your turn, Monica.
All right. So we're almost done. We have, looks like about 7 minutes, and I want to allow some time
Okay.
at the end to discuss some things. So I'm going to go through this a little fast. Kind of our last topic is talking about making a difference and activism. And this has always been a topic and children being involved, but I have to admit, I have noticed a lot more in the publishing industry, children's books coming out about like what children can do and, activism and stuff. And it's important because, they're seeing all these things happening in the world and, knowing that they can do something to make a difference, and they're following their interests, whether it's environmentalism or, bullying or whatever it is, like what can they do to make a difference? So we are water protectors is the first one here. And that was kind of the impetus for this program. It's our young person's choice for our Rogue Reads program that we're in our last month of. And it's not the easiest, picture book. It's not like, the dinosaurs playing and whatever. And so it's, it's a heavier topic about, environmentalism and protests about the oil pipeline and how that's affecting the indigenous people, and how children can be involved in those protests. So the next one is called Be a King. I meant to say about the last one, it won the Caldecott Medal last year for its illustrations. The illustrations are amazing, and it has been highly reviewed by pretty much any source that's read it. So it's a very, very well regarded book. So Be a King by Carol Boston Weatherford. I'll just mention that that she, as an author, has written so many great books for children, and especially ones featuring the African American experience. And she's also one of those authors who wins awards pretty much every year, including this year's announcements for Newbery and Caldecott, Newbery, the various different awards that they have each year that come out. I know for sure it won a Caldecott, I can't remember all the other ones. So, but again, it was Martin Luther King Day recently. The kids learn about Martin Luther King. They learn about the protests. They learn about the I Have a Dream speech. This one takes a different approach. It is more about what children can do. Each page says, starts with Be a King, and then it gives some examples of how they can do things that go along with what Dr. King, the ideals that he talked about. So one example that I had was one page says, "You can be a king, stand for peace, band together against bullies." So that kind of speaks to like the nonviolence that he promoted. Bullies, we're going to still stand for peace. And bullies is one of those topics that kids can really relate to. Like there's just always going to be bullies around, and that's kind of gone forever. So there's just examples like that. And then there's also wonderful illustrations that complement it and will show some of the things. There'll be pictures sometimes of Martin Luther King or some of the events that happened during his time, but it doesn't even really ever speak about him. So it's not a biography, but anyway, I think that's a real wonderful and different approach to books about Martin Luther King. So, and again, read it all year long. These issues happen all year long. And then lastly, Change Sings is a new book by Amanda Gorman, who was the Youth Poet Laureate, who spoke at last year's inauguration. And she says that she wrote this book because she believes that every child has the ability to make a difference. And it's beautifully illustrated, bright colors, and a hopeful, positive message. And of course, as Poet Laureate, it's written as a poem. So it's not like super straightforward as poems, can be like somewhat abstract and stuff. So it is a good one to, talk about and help your children like make sense about it. But in the example like I gave before, where the little girl reads the Emily Dickinson book and doesn't really totally understand it, they don't have to totally understand everything about this to pick up on the positive message for it. So, oh gosh, that went fast. That went really fast. So I'll have her go to the next one. So we have more lists on our catalog about tricky topics. You can find our lists under our catalog when you go to search. Instead of, there's a box that says search in the catalog. If you use that drop down, you'll see one for lists. So you'll be able to see our tricky topics one if you just use that as a search term, or we can help you with that. And we have more that we're adding, and would also, you know, be happy to take your requests for topics and suggestions on things that would help you.
Yeah.
So now, if there's any questions in the whole 1 minute, we can go a little bit more here. Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing, I think.
Okay.
And there we are.
Okay.
And there's our, I'm looking in that chat.
Yeah, so you can ask any questions in the chat. We do have some comments in there. Do you want to go over those? Not necessarily questions too much, but some really good comments in there.
There's a question that says, yeah, there's some comments here. There's one that says, are there some titles to recommend for understanding how it is that some students are homeless, not just the people on the street? Gosh, that's a really good point. I'm writing it down. So one of our,
I was gonna say, we do have a list going on that, you know, deals with homelessness and poverty and stuff like that. I don't.
There's one book that's called Maddie's Fridge. The family's not homeless, but they are experiencing food insecurity, and it's about two friends, and one of the kids goes home to the other kid's house and says, "Oh, let's have a snack," and opens up the fridge and there's not much in there, and they these two friends kind of negotiate that together and figure out what that means, and then they, you know, and it's a really solid friendship book, and but treats on the food insecurity part. But you're right about the children who are unhoused. We should make sure we've got something with that. See, this is great. I love it. So if you have topics that are like, what about this? We'll look for, maybe we have a book like that already. Maybe we don't. There are absolutely things that we've missed. And that's one nice thing about being a public library, is that we take input from the public about what you want, what you need.
I read one called Aunt Pearl, where it's Aunt Pearl who comes, and she comes with her shopping cart of all of her belongings and stays with the family for a while. And one of the children gets involved with her, but it's not necessarily the child itself. But that was a really good one. But I just don't remember if I read any. But we will certainly look, like Ellie said.
So I'm putting in our chat now at the bottom a link that will take you to the existing tricky topics lists. I think that we are building them. They're new still, and we're going to continue to build them because new books come out all the time, and we discover gaps in our collection, maybe, or things that we know we should build. Like we wanted an example of that is we wanted to build a list on divorce, because that's something that kids deal with, and a book can be a helpful tool for that one. And we found that a lot of the books that we had were kind of outdated, and so we're going to work on building up that collection so that we can better support families that need it in that way. So if you have a question like that, or a topic that you need or that you notice we don't have, we love that kind of feedback.
Oh, we got a nice compliment. Thank you so much. We've really enjoyed working on this, I know, and we've really learned a lot. Yeah. I think we have something in Q&A. In your opinion, is there a line between the reader being able to read what they want versus guardian preferences? I guess I mean is I don't want to upset someone by what I give out for people to read. As a library staff member, do I just leave it up to the parent to make the decisions? What about the older kids who come in by themselves and just hang out all day? So,
okay.
great question. Kind of multi-part, so let me kind of like break it down a little bit. So I would just say, you know, whether as a staff member or whether as somebody who knows about a book and, you know, would be, you know, possibly referring it to somebody else, is just, you know, you can let them know what it's about. If it's something that's, you know, like I said, the Goodbye book, which is, you know, more, it handles the subject, but in a more innocuous way, you can like point out the different books and which ones are going to be, I don't know what I want to say about it, but, you know, different levels of, you know, seriousness and how it is. You know, you can point that out to them, but ultimately it's the caregiver's choice. And I always err on giving them more so that they can, you know, make that decision themselves.
Yeah, every family has to figure out what's right for them according to what's a good fit for their family. Jenna, I know you're thinking about older kids too. I remember when Hunger Games was super popular, the book, and everybody was reading it. I did a presentation to a school that was an elementary school group. And I was doing like, it was a big, it was like a small school assembly kind of thing. And I think it was a 4th or 5th grader who was like, "What about Hunger Games? Is that a book that I should read?" And I was like, "Well, you probably could read it, but I don't know if you'd like it very much at this point in your life. I mean, a lot of people really like it, but it's really written for somebody who's older than you are. And there's a lot of violence in it, and it might not be something that you're ready for." And he's sort of like, "Oh, okay." He took like he didn't. I don't think he would have liked it as much if I just said, "Oh no, you're too young for that." But I explained that there's some content in it, some violent content that he might not be comfortable with. And he felt okay about that because I respected him as a capable reader who could read the book, but I told him why I thought it might not be up for him. Oh, and I have another example actually. When Twilight was super popular, I knew like a 3rd grader who had 2 big sisters who were reading the book, and she really wanted to read it. And she and I had this, and they were at the library without any parents around. And I had the conversation with her where I was like, "Okay, well, I can't tell you not to read a book. I'm not your parent. But I can tell you that if you are reading this book and you come across something that makes you uncomfortable, it's okay to close the book, put it down and pick it up again in a few years when it's more, what feels right for you." And I think that while it's ultimately it's good for adults to be paying attention to what their kids are reading and tuned in and helping their children make those decisions, I think it's also good for children to know that it's okay to close a book if they don't feel right, if it doesn't feel right to them. And a lot of kids will. If it doesn't feel right for them, they'll put it down and they'll close it, or they might even just skip over the yucky parts and go and move on to the next part. So anyway.
And I'll just add really quick, we did for this presentation, we did focus on preschool through like the older elementary school. We did leave out, or middle school. We did not add young adult books, but there are a number of young adult books on these topics, and children will be reading these independently. So it is a good idea to like, if you see a child reading a book and, you know, maybe see the blurb or whatever, you know, just whatever the book is, like ask them what they're reading and, you know, what it's about and that sort of thing. Because you can maybe like start the conversation with them on that, maybe decide to read it together.
And that's where coming back around to the, like, if they have somebody that they know they can trust to ask questions of without judgment, that's a big deal.
Okay, well, we went a little over, but we really appreciate you guys coming today and all the great comments and questions. And, you know, it doesn't have to end here. We would be happy to, you know, get your suggestions, get your questions. Don't think we have anywhere where we have our emails or whatever, but, you know, you can certainly get that at the library.
Yeah, and you can always contact. You can find us. We work at the library.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, we've really enjoyed learning more about these topics, and we will continue learning and building our collection and building our lists. So this is the community. We're all going to do this together, and we appreciate your help.